Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the MacDonald View from Seagulls Central. Thank you so much for tuning in again to what is today an emergency bonus special edition. Had to jump on last minute, crazy news, and we have to talk about it. An episode dedicated to the great man that is Pascal Gross, as we have learnt of the news over the last couple of days. Obviously, it's been rumbling on throughout this kind of summer since the close of the season, really, and throughout the Euros. However, it is being confirmed. It has been confirmed. Pascal Gross has left Brighton. He has joined Borussia Dortmund for a deal, reported by different outlets to be somewhere within the region of about £8 to £10 million. He signed a 2-year deal with Borussia Dortmund. And, for him, I imagine it's a dream move, moving back to Germany, a club he's, reported to have followed, when he was a youngster and stuff. But Brighton lose their best player, or one of their best players again, and this time it's not a young player, it's not a 19-year-old, it's not a 22-year-old, it's a 32-year-old, 33-year-old who has been a magnificent servant for this club and has been the architect of so many fantastic moments over the last 6-7 years since he joined the club. And I think there's so much we're going to get into over this, throughout this episode, but I felt like we kind of just I personally had to dedicate an extended period of time to talk about him, because I think putting him as a footnote in the middle of a kind of game review after the QPR game or something, I just don't think that would have felt right. This man is so important to our football club. He's on the Legends Wall. I don't know if it's kind of build a statue moment, because we don't really have any statues, outside the Amex. I think Tony Bloom, it would never happen, but I think, someone like a Chris Hughton as well, would deserve something. Lewis Dunk, of course, as well. But Pascal Gross is probably in the top 5, Albion legends of the modern era on and off the pitch. Certainly in my lifetime. Obviously, there's kind of cult heroes from when I was younger, when we were at Withdean and stuff. But in terms of those, and there are legends from that era as well. But in terms of kind of modern day legends, he's really seen us through a period. I suppose someone like Lewis Dunk, you could say, has seen us through more of that period. And obviously Tony Bloom has been the architect of that period as well. So perhaps those guys are, definitely Tony Bloom. Lewis Dunk clearly is probably more, more influential as well, I guess. But I think that you can't underestimate, and I don't want to use that word influential, because you can't underestimate, you can't kind of rank amongst players the influence that each one has. I think the influence that this man Pascal Gross has had for Brighton and Hove Albion, it is incomparable. It's completely incomparable. And I think we're losing an absolute giant of a player. Clearly a massive leader, a player who's incredibly consistent every single week, pretty much. Someone who knows the club, it's a cliched term, but they know the club, and someone who does just come up with so many clutch moments, so many of those massive important moments, goals when we need it, goals in big defining moments. You look back through our recent history since he's been at the club, the 7 years or so that he's been here. It's moment after moment after moment. Each season you can pinpoint 2 or 3 massive moments where he's been at the heart of it. And a huge loss. So if I just quickly talk through the kind of terms of the deal, he's joining on a 2-year contract. This has been something that, as I'm sure you'll be aware of, it's been rumbling on, for the best part of, 6 weeks, 2 months or so. Certainly since the Euros ended, we've known for a couple of seasons that German clubs have taken interest in Pascal Gross in trying to kind of lure him back to Germany. And I think it was something he was genuinely considering. I think last season, and it might have even been the season before, I know there was I can't remember the club. Was it Werder Bremen or was it Frankfurt back then? There have been a couple of clubs who have been kind of lingering around Pascal Gross, and I think he's had a few situations over the last few years where his contract's been a bit, up in the air, and maybe he's only got 1 year left, etc. We've obviously renewed it, and I think there's always been that interest. He's spoken publicly for many years about his desire to kind of head back to Germany one day and kind of finish his career there. And I suppose he's now at a point where, getting a German national team call up has clearly raised, or obviously not just that, but, he's got a national team call up and he's now kind of heading back to the second biggest club in Germany. And he's going to get Champions League football. It's a huge move for him. And I'm pleased that he's got this move over like a Frankfurt move or a Werder Bremen or whoever was kind of interested in him, a few years ago. This is a team who got to the Champions League final last season. This is a team who, I'm sure they probably won't replicate that this season, but a team who are going to be competitive in the Champions League this coming season. It sounds like they want to make him a big part of that team as well. And I think he deserves it. He completely deserves this. And he deserves this over a kind of decent upper half Bundesliga side to see out his career quite quietly. I think it's a fantastic way for him to spend the last, 2 seasons of his career before he decides his next move. So from his perspective, it's wonderful. And you can see, when we saw, on Tuesday night, the photos of him kind of arriving for his medical, you could see that delight on his face. Obviously, he looked really well. He looked really happy. Obviously, he's got a tan. He's been on holiday and stuff. But you could see that smile on his face and that excitement. And it's a huge move for him. And I think it's interesting. I think for me, I do find it quite interesting that the club have really given the blessing on this one because, in my opinion, he's still a massive player for Brighton. And it's clear that Fabian Hürzeler seems to think that as well and had many conversations with him with regards to wanting to keep him, and the club clearly would have had those same conversations too from a kind of senior executive level, and I'm not surprised they've kind of accepted this fee, but I think it's something they'll have really done with a heavy heart, and something which will now have to kind of kick into action a form of replacement planning, essentially, because this player has been someone who's so unique to us. A player who, yes, has spoken about his versatility, but his creative output is unrivaled for any Brighton player over this last 5, 6, 7 years. He's consistently the player who creates us the most chances, who secures us the most assists. He is our all-time Premier League goal scorer. The impact he has on this team, both scoring goals, creating goals, but also just ensuring that we are delivering that technical style of play that the Brighton model want and the Brighton model has created over these last few years. He's been such a massive part of forging that, starting obviously with Chris Hughton when it was a rather different style of play, much more pragmatic, but moving through that transitional period, moving into the successive managers we've had, and there's no doubt he would have been a part of kind of forging this new style of play again under Fabian Hürzeler. And I think whoever we replace him with, however our midfield looks, I'm reasonably confident with our midfield setup now. I think if we'd had Pascal Gross, I'd have been very happy with it going into this season. I think now I do think there's a little bit of work that needs to be done, or at least from my perspective, I need to be convinced a bit more just from seeing these players in my eyes a bit more. Players like Weaver and obviously Gomez coming in, and I want to see Hinshelwood back in that midfield again, just to kind of get that confidence back. With him, obviously we haven't seen him for so long. There are definitely options there, but I think you can't underestimate how important he's been, and the moments he's provided. I mean, I'm just going to get up here a list of some of the moments that he's kind of been part of for us, and I'm going to go through a few of them. By the way, thanks to Mike King on Twitter who tweeted this, and it's just a good memory jogger. Because if you don't, you might not know this, my memory is actually quite awful. People will sometimes say to me like, "Oh, do you remember that game? Do you remember that goal?" And I'll remember that, but then I won't remember like something quite important personal. So it's all a bit weird. But it's nice to kind of get these memories jogged for me. So, of course, how can you forget this? And even I wouldn't forget this. The first Premier League goal. I remember that game so clearly. I think it was the second home game at the Amex in that Premier League era. Obviously, we'd had that Man City game on that amazing kind of, felt like a summer's evening. Was it 3 p.m? It felt like it might have been like a 5:30 kickoff from the kind of the way I can just see the light and stuff from the memories. I can see the light. But yeah, that was the second home game. I know that was definitely 3 p.m. kickoff against West Brom. And he scored 2 goals that day, didn't he? One down one end, and I'm pretty sure one down the other. Or was it just one? I can't remember. But he definitely scored that first Premier League goal, and it kind of goes off the corner of the post in that right-hand corner, and the goalkeeper kind of almost gets to it, low driven. And I'm pretty sure he scored the same goal pretty much again down in the kind of north stand end. But yeah, a massive player. He had such a massive impact. And to think that he'd only signed a month, 6 weeks before that. I know he was like very early on in that window. We'd signed him, the first ever Premier League player. And I think he would have come in, he would have been 26 at the time. I think he was 26, 27, coming into the prime of his career, getting Premier League football. And I suppose none of us really knew what to expect from anyone at Premier League level in our squad. I think even, you trusted a lot of the players we had brought with us, but there were so many, the whole thing was unknown. And, would you have expected him to stay at the club for like 7 years? I think probably not. I think you almost think when you come up into the Premier, these players might not cut it. We might go down, we might get relegated, they might get picked up, we might lose them after 3-4 years anyway. And I think the interesting thing about Pascal Gross was it did feel like I think less so recently, but it's felt like for a long time he's been so underappreciated. And I think, you go back to that first memory, but then in the years that kind of followed that, the kind of 2 years under Houghton, and even really in the Potter era, he was so underappreciated. Of course, by the wider media and the wider fan base across the UK, but and across the Premier League, but within the Brighton fan base as well, he wasn't hugely appreciated. He's not a player with blistering pace. He's not a player who kind of, you're not going to see him take on a player or beat a man in the same way Mitoma can. The dribbling's not amazing, but is that playmaker ability. And I think sometimes his qualities were kind of accused of slowing the game down a little bit or kind of stifling a bit. And I remember often saying that, it was very suited to like Chris Hughton's style, but less so kind of Graham Potter or Roberto De Zerbi. And I think particularly under Potter, I think that was just how Potter played his football, wasn't it? It was very solid. It was resolute. It was pretty football. It was possession-based football. But it was a massive change from the Chris Hughton style, but it still had that kind of level of pragmatism. We were decent defensively. We weren't like De Zerbi's side. Forgive me, we weren't like De Zerbi's side where we were kind of, creating chances 24/7 and everything was electric and blistering pace. And I think we saw kind of 3 different versions of Pascal Gross over the years, going back from those first years in the Premier League and how he's matured, become a more versatile player, but then also a player who I think the fan base have really taken to a lot more, and a player who's shown so much more versatility in his style as we've had to kind of use him over those years. Potter, of course, known for using players in kind of a versatile manner and playing players out of position. I think that was the first time we really saw it was under Graham Potter, and his ability to, I think it's that game intelligence that he had, that he could still create chances from right back. And I think obviously you see that with players nowadays like Trent Alexander-Arnold, but Pascal Gross for us was almost that. He was getting assists, he was creating chances in games, and it was worth having him on the pitch, even if he was at right back. If we wanted to have a different midfield makeup, or Gross and Caicedo and McAllister, let's say, for example, or a Basuma and McAllister, you might think there's not a place for Pascal Gross if you don't want, if you want someone else at the 10, for example, you can't put him there. Getting him in at right back or even left back was worth it because it meant that, and he was solid defensively as well. He was pretty solid. He never got overly exposed, and I think having that protection in players like Lewis Dunk helped, and Veltman and Webster. But he can make chances from all over the pitch, so it's unbelievable. Then you go back to the goal that kept us up in that season. I'm just looking at this list again. The goal that kept us up that season. I've got such a clear visceral memory of that. May time, evening match, Friday night was it, or a Saturday night, evening game, and that ball that, was it even a midweek? I actually think it might have been a midweek. Was it maybe midweek? And the ball, you get headers down. Does it go over the line? Does it not? What happens? The ref, everyone's running, the ref does his little watch. It was amazing. It was an amazing moment. And I can, lots of my memories, I think you kind of remember things differently as time goes on, and maybe you remember it through, you remember it in your head, but then you might also remember it through kind of the TV shot that you've kind of watched back so many times. But that, for me, I've still got a really clear memory of sat in the West Stand and down towards the end of the kind of North Stand side of the West Stand, and having such a clear image of that. And I just remember that moment. It was amazing. And then you turn around and you go, oh my God, we're going to be in the Premier League for another season. What the hell? Because everyone at that time had said about how we were the team to go down. Everyone backed Brighton to go down. And he and Chris Hughton, huge part, obviously Lewis Dunk, so many other players, Dale Stevens, I think, even Hemed in that season was decent, chipped in with his goals, Murray. There were so many important players in that season who kept us up, who transitioned us from that promotion side to the team that stayed up. And I think he was an example of the way that we were first trying to evolve into that Premier League team. And what a signing. Countless goals against the Big Six, Mike says here, and it's so true. He loved the goal against Man United. I think back to Man United away, those 2 goals under Potter. I think it was 2022 summer. Scored again, this time last year at Old Trafford, kind of August time of 2023 under De Zerbi with that amazing, when he jinks it in and out and sits down to Sandro Martinez, then puts in the corner. Chelsea goals when Potter came back to the Amex and he finishes it off. I think we'd gone 3-0 up. They come back to 3-1 or something, was it? Or 3-2. And then he gets that final goal and Ciso rifles it, parries off the keeper. Pascal Gross finishes it. Finished was his celebration. And it was that game was absolutely crazy. Man United at home games, thinking back to Liverpool games as well. I don't recall him scoring goals against Man City. Tottenham, I'm struggling to think. But, so many important games for us in clutch moments. Then, as it says in this list here, the goal to confirm Europe. That day, just over a year ago, at the end of May, middle of May, against Southampton, the 3-1 win at the Amex. Evan Ferguson, I think, scores twice, 2 really good goals, or 1 brilliant goal and 1 decent goal. And then I think they come back to 2-1 or something. Then Pascal Gross, towards the end of the game, as we're trying to see it out, can we get this one over the line? Can we get Europe? Can we get this one over the line? What are we going to do? Ball drops to in the box. Jinx left. Jinx back right. Off his left foot. Bangs it into the corner of the goal. In front of the North Stand. Secures Europe. And that day was unbelievable. Do you remember it? De Zerbi on the pitch at the end of the game. Another huge moment that Pascal Gross has been a part of. And then, when we go into Europe, it says here, inspiringly come back in Marseille. Now, that game in Marseille, probably, what was it, December time, was it? October time, I think it was. And we'd gone 2-0 down. Obviously, bring it back to 2-2. A really good result in the end. Pascal Gross, with an amazing finish, a really clean finish. The inside of his right foot. Perfectly side-footed into the bottom left-hand corner in a massively clutch moment. And we talk about these clutch moments. And it's just another one for him where we really needed that in the moment. We needed something to waken us up. We needed something to get us going again. It was one moment of magic. Lamptey down the left-hand side, beat his man, gets the ball into the box. It's not the best ball ever. Pascal Gross just gets on the end of it, bangs, and we're back in the game. And that set the tone maybe for our Europa League campaign, which ended up being fairly decent in the end. And we got some very good away days and decent draws, a decent draw from it in Roma. If we'd lost that game, who knows? We might not have topped the group. We might not have even made it out the group. It could have changed the whole momentum of that campaign. And I think De Zerbi spoke about that. How he was so important in that. There's so many of them. I could probably go on for even more. I think back to that Man United game at the end of last season was unbelievable. So many goals this season as well. I was looking at his goal tally from this season. There's so many brilliant goals in that as well. But also a player who so many managers wanted, and kind of made an important player for them. At the time, under Hughton and Potter, I think particularly under those Potter years, when the expectation rose a little bit, there was a lot of criticism within our fan base around Pascal Gross. And I remember it with Dale Stevens as well. I kind of understand that because the output attacking-wise was less with Stevens, but the assertion from Pascal towards Pascal Gross was that he was too slow. He would slow the game down. He wasn't doing enough for the team. And I think the fact that every single manager who has had him has really wanted to use him shows his quality. I remember when Adam Lallana came in and he gave an interview to someone quite early on, a couple of weeks into joining Brighton, and obviously been at Liverpool. I think they'd just won the Premier League, just before he left, the top team where he'd won the Champions League there. And he was giving an interview, and we were thinking, oh my God, Lallana's going to be that figure, that number 10 figure who really takes us to the next attacking level or helps us to. But the irony was that Gross still was that, and he overtook Lallana and kept Lallana out of the teams at the time. And I remember Lallana, who obviously is an unbelievably technically gifted player, probably in my opinion, and I don't know whether people agree. I think probably the most technically talented player to ever play at the club. He obviously didn't produce anywhere near what he could have for this club in terms of goals, in terms of assists. But I think technically the ability to control the ball and use the ball and manipulate the ball, I think he is right up there. I know people say Vicente and stuff, but I just do think Adam Lallana, it's a different league, Anyway, he comes in and the first thing he says is, I remember so clearly the way he worded it. He goes, we got a player called Pascal Gross in our team. This would have been like 2020 maybe. Got a player called Pascal Gross in our team who's absolutely technically unbelievable. And the guy who was interviewing goes, yeah, he seems pretty good. And the bloke had no idea. He just thought I was another Premier League player. And so many players and fans and pundits outside of Brighton didn't really appreciate Pascal Gross. And you could tell that Lallana came in and he played with him and he just got it. And so many other managers got it. And he was such an important part of it. Where did Brighton move next, I think, is a really interesting question on this. I think our midfield setup is interesting. Obviously, Baleba, Weaver, different styles of players, but perhaps more in that defensive mould. Gomez looks like he's maybe a bit more of a kind of box-to-box kind of style of player who can contribute in attacking positions. We've obviously got Hinshelwood as well, Ayeri. We're going to probably lose Gilmour as well. So our profile of midfield is really changing. I think generally with our squad, we're in quite a transitional period. We're all across the pitch, but I think particularly that midfield is really changing. And I think if we'd kept Gross, that midfield would have been on point for me going into this season, because we would have had that nice balance of kind of the youth of kind of Baleba and Hinshelwood and Ayeri, with the kind of defensive qualities of Weaver and Baleba, but then also kind of we'd have confidence in that kind of attacking style of Gross, and maybe we would have wanted another one to kind of come in that kind of same Gross model, maybe someone like a Gomez or someone like Hinshelwood to step up in that role. And I think now we don't have that Gross. We're going to rely a lot more on those players who maybe we wouldn't have. And that is what happened last year. We were relying a lot on players like Billy Gilmour and Pascal Gross, who were probably overworked due to losing players like Caicedo and McAllister, and even really Basuma, not massively replacing those players. Maybe, I guess that's unfair. We probably did replace Basuma quite well with Caicedo. But I think where we go next is interesting. Are there any players in this team who match the profile of him? I don't think really. I think it'll be interesting to see what this Diego Gomez is going to really be like in terms of his style. I think my mind goes back to when Roberto De Zerbi spoke about Jack Hinshelwood, and he said he's Pascal Gross's son, and he was obviously using a metaphor to kind of talk about the style of play and his ability to kind of have a similar style to Pascal Gross. And I think that's interesting, whether the club are of that view as well, and maybe they have a confidence that he's going to be able to step up into that role. You can't put that on an 18, 19-year-old. I think that's incredibly unfair. Of course, he won Young Player of the Season last season, but I think those comments from Roberto De Zerbi show what kind of player he thought Jack Hinshelwood is stylistically. So whether he'll kind of step up into that replacement role, I think will be quite interesting. But it creates a huge dilemma for us going into this season. I think we're light. We're losing a massive amount of input this season. I think it's going to be a huge hole to replace. So as we come towards the end of this, just to round it off, thank you, Pascal Gross. To be honest, what a player! Our greatest ever Premier League signing. Maybe our best ever player. Many people will think the best ever player. Lots of people's favourite ever player. I think he embodied Brighton in the end. Not a local lad, but he became so synonymous with this Brighton style and creating moments for us. Being part of that special memories that we have around Brighton. He's written into all of the stories that we remember about Brighton's recent history. And I really hope he gets an opportunity to say goodbye to the fan base and come back, and we can do a little thing maybe in the pre-season game or whatever. Maybe they can do friendly against Dortmund next season. Who knows? But it might feel a bit late by then. But I hope it doesn't become a situation like a Chris Hughton, where we've kind of never had him back at the club and we never got a proper thank you. So yeah, thank you, Pascal Gross, and massive good luck. Look forward to seeing you in the Champions League next season. It's going to be. I really hope he goes on to show what he can do in the Champions League and he gets those plaudits, because he begun to get it kind of with the German national side, and you can tell there's a bit more of an appreciation from him in his home country. And I really hope he just absolutely smashes it going into this new season. So thank you, Pascal Gross, and thank you for watching this. It's been emotional. It's been good to look back, and I think it raises some interesting questions going over these next few weeks about how we're going to replace Pascal Gross and what our midfield profile is going to look like going into the next season. So that'll be in a future video. But thanks so much for watching. Leave a comment. Please do subscribe. Please leave a comment. Please like the video if you've enjoyed this, and please let me know, how are we going to replace Pascal Gross? How, what can we do to replace him? Tell me about the impact that he's had on you, those goals. What are your favourite Pascal Gross memories? And do you think he's going to smash it in Dortmund? I think he will. So yeah, I'll see you after the QPR game this weekend, Saturday, 3 p.m. at Loftus Road. In the meantime, stay safe, keep well. Thank you very much for watching, and up the Albion.